you so much for coming along.
My name is Halpin. I'm the Community Aid Officer at TENI, the Transgender Equality Network.
My name is Lilith. I'm the National Community Development Officer with TENI.
So what we do at TENI, which stands for the Transgender Equality Network Ireland, is we fight for the rights and equality of trans people and non-binary people all across Ireland. We kind of focus on three main areas, so that would be education, advocacy and support.
And so it's important to have an organisation like TENI, which is a national organisation that that talks to the unique challenges that the community faces.
My name's Blanckensee and I'm a member of the Board of Directors at Transgender Equality Network Ireland, and I identify as non-binary, so I use either they or he pronouns. The trans community in Ireland often isn't seen, and TENI provides a voice for the community in a number of different spheres, so going into employers and supporting them, working with people within healthcare, within the government, as well as supporting people on the ground and supporting the support groups that support the people on the ground.
Strikes are under attack! Stand up, fight back! Trans rights are under attack!
Everyone, I'm just looking at Twitter there and the hashtag's climbing. So keep tweeting and we'll try and hit number one.
So the trans community in the last few years have had, a number of triumphs when it comes to equality. Now we're still not quite 100% there, but I think one of our biggest triumphs in Ireland for the trans community was legal gender recognition legislation. It means that trans people who identify as male or female can self-identify their gender, and that means we can legally change our gender and our names on legal documents such as our birth certificates, our passports, anything and everything that needs your name and gender, to be honest.
To see that go from a court case and from the GRAG report that came out in 2012, which was taking the UK legislation, which is requires a panel of doctors and it requires you to be diagnosed and to be divorced, and it was only over 18s, to what we got in 2015. It was just an unrecognisable piece of legislation.
Yeah, and I cannot talk about gender recognition without talking about an amazing woman called Dr. Lydia Foy, who was a trans woman and began her fight to get her name on her birth cert. That's all she wanted. In, I think it was 1992, she began that fight. And that all took up to 2013, when they still hadn't enacted legislation. She took them back to court again to get it put in place, and it was then that the trans community came on board, TENI came on board, got right in behind Dr. Foy, and in 2015 the legislation was enacted.
What we really tried to do is show the human side of all of this, so we did high visibility work in the media, but really we went and we had lawyers and we had doctors speaking with us, but honestly my job in that was to talk about my story and talk about what it meant for me to be seen as a woman illegally by society, and the fact that wasn't how I identified. Unfortunately, we didn't get everything we could want, so non-binary recognition is a really big one, recognition for under 16s, and also there's some kind of more like logistical issues that need to be worked out, but we really did achieve an awful lot by really just telling stories, human stories.
I think another triumph that's worth mentioning is visibility. And only in the past few years, trans people are now so much more visible in society. We're much more visible in film and on television and sports, and we're seeing trans people rising and being successful you know, in more recent years, and I think that's a massive triumph for the community, a community that was very much underground and very much thought of as ill or weirdos, where, you know, people are beginning to realise that we are like everybody else. We're your nurses, we're your kids' teachers, we're the guys that pick up your bins on a Tuesday, you know, we're just like everybody else, and people are starting to realise that because trans people are feeling much more safe to come out and be visible in society.
Seeing TENI's network of support groups expand is a huge triumph, to see the community really blossom together.
From my perspective, I think you know, we had that triumph in 2015 with gender recognition. I came out about a year after that, and for me, in terms of like big wins or that sort of thing, I unfortunately haven't seen it. I think that there is a lot of personal triumphs that, you know, people have. You know, more trans people feel like they can come out and they can live their lives. But in terms of, you know, what trans people need, unfortunately things have continued to deteriorate and get worse and worse and worse.
Trans rights are under attack. Stand up, fight back. Trans rights are under attack. Stand up, fight back. Trans rights are under attack. Stand up, fight back.
I think we can't talk about triumphs and wins without talking about the struggles and the inequalities that the trans community in Ireland still face.
It's probably kind of two main things. One is legal recognition for trans people under 16 and non-binary people, which still isn't the case. And the other is just the horrific situation that healthcare currently is in this country.
So we still in Ireland work off this really archaic, non-evidential based model of care that really pathologizes trans people. We consider in our health system being trans as a psychiatric disorder.
When I was starting to transition in 2012, I was seen by a clinical psychologist and diagnosed, and 3 months later was attending Blanckensee, given hormone treatment, and then I was able to kind of move along the system quite quickly, and by 2014 I was quite happy with my body. And so that's about 3 years after I came out initially, and I waited about a year to want to be medically transitioning. Today, 3 years after somebody has even gotten themselves referred to a medical practitioner, they won't have seen them.
And in Ireland, if you want to get hormone replacement therapy, you have to wait for the one service in the country that provides that to trans people, and their waiting list is currently 3.5 years long. And this is just for hormone replacement therapy that GPs provide every single day to cisgender people.
The National Gender Service was set up in 2018. They've gotten a lot of resources, and you know, all that I can see is that they've used those resources to erect even more and more barriers for trans people to access bodily autonomy.
And for people who say that trans healthcare isn't essential or that it's not life-saving, you know, I'd very much argue that. The only study ever done in Ireland with the trans community would state that, you know, I think it's 82% of trans people had suicidal ideation or had attempted suicide prior to medical treatment, and that dropped to 0% after that.
It used to be the case that that people under 18, there was a child and adolescent service, but that service has collapsed. And so no one under 18 currently has access to healthcare for trans people on the public system.
There's more resources being put into trans healthcare, but those resources have been accompanied by gatekeepers and a huge waiting list. And like, when you think that it was a 3-month waiting list in 2012 and today it's a 3-year waiting list, that's quite scary.
The model of care that we use here, and I use the word care very flippantly, is based on a system of having to prove yourself and not based off a system of being believed. So what we do need to do is introduce international best practice standards of care by WPATH, which is the World Association for Transgender Health, and that means an informed consent model.
Trans people have a right to the same access to healthcare that cis people do, without having to be pathologized, without having to have hours-long psychiatric assessments and psychological assessments and meetings with, you know, all sorts of other clinicians in order to just get to be able to make decisions for themselves about their own bodies.
Something wonderful that I love seeing now is younger trans people growing up in a much more accepting environment than say I would have, or trans people that are older than me. So, you know, I'm loving seeing, you know, kids feeling comfortable to come out younger, and their friends are knowledgeable and support them, and their families want to learn and want to support their children. And, you know, that's not an Ireland I saw 10 years ago.
In 2012, I was the youngest person who would speak openly, and I was 18, and really one of the reasons I was being asked to speak was because nobody else my age was in a place where their parents were supportive and that they felt comfortable speaking in front of a camera or in front of or on the radio. But now 18 would be very old to be seen as a young trans person.
That leads to a happier life when kids are able to come out young and are accepted just for who they are and not who people think they are.